What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 prop stream for the PGA Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure tomorrow with a look at the averages, a weather report for Sunday's play, as well as my favorite pieces of exposure on sites like Underdog and Prize Picks to give you an idea of how to attack the slate. So any questions you got, any sort of bets you want me to deep dive, feel free to go ahead and throw them in chat. But I see we got Bobby down there already. Seems to have made a bunch of money on a Scotty Scheffler under. So good stuff to you. We also got Joseph down there, so welcome on in. A little bit of bourbon in the cup, so enjoying ourselves and ready to get after it for tomorrow's action. Today was a little strange with them changing up the tee times, having a delay as soon as the weather started, but we were on top of it, trying to adjust when we got that news in the morning. And some of the green regulation fades that I played today ended up saving a lot of my exposure. So a weird one, but ready to get after it for moving day. We got Antonio down there as well. Cheers to all of you guys, and let's go ahead and hop right on in. We got this 13 Colonies bourbon, by the way, which I won't say is my favorite, but it gets the job done, that's for sure. But you can see the averages on here, which were a little bit harder, like you were expecting them to be. And of course, due to all the wind they had this afternoon, but maybe not as hard as some people thought they were going to have. So birdie average was about 3 per round. That actually didn't drop all that much, which was kind of predictable if you saw the pin locations. They made them easier on the par 4s. Also, the reachable par 5s were at the easiest possible pin locations. So tomorrow, we'll talk about how the pins will change that, but I actually think that this will be rather consistent from rounds 3 to 4. Bogey average went up because of all the winds out there. You had more missed greens, some holes that were playing a lot lengthier that were into the wind. So not a surprise that that ticked up a little bit. I will say with the lower winds in the forecast for Sunday, that the bogey average will probably go down a little bit, I'd say, maybe to closer to about 4 per round. But because the birdie average is also going to stay about the same, I do think it'll get a little easier with some of the stroke averages, but not a ton. So like maybe closer to like a +1, a plus 1.25 scoring average is what I'm personally calling for. And we'll get to the details here in a second on exactly why that's the case. But the fairway average going to stay rather consistent, I would say. And the green average will probably get a little bit easier compared to today, but nothing, like 10.5 per round or anything. It'll probably go up to about 10 per round, I would say, compared to where it was for round 3. The reason for that would be slightly more favorable weather conditions, which is why I think in general it'll get a little bit easier. But these pins, which I've already gone through, are a lot trickier than they look like on paper. So we're going to go hole by hole. I'll give you a taste for why that is going to be the case. But the general idea with these pins is that I don't think there's going to be as many birdies out there because the par 5s are in hard spots. The drivable par 4s aren't going to be nearly as gettable for tomorrow. I do think that some of the harder holes are set up easier than what they were for moving day. So maybe there's going to be more pars made for the field. But because the conditions are going to be softer than what you had for today, that's why I think it's going to get neutralized a bit. So that's it from the averages perspective. You can see with the weather here, morning wave does look a little bit calmer than the afternoon, but keep in mind that the morning wave guys tomorrow are going to be the guys towards the bottom end of the leaderboard and your players that are out of form. And if you take a look at the leaderboard right now, which I think I have a tab up with it. Yeah, it's over here. Look at the bottom is all these guys that were shooting like +5, +6, even +7s and +8s towards the bottom end of the leaderboard here that were also towards the bottom heading in. So you can see that there's out of form players really tended to struggle out there. Not to say that they were all guys that were starting towards the bottom. Like you still had some really shitty rounds from like Zane Hoot, who started towards the top end of the board. Max Homa started at -5 and still shot +5. But of the guys that are down here at like +5 or worse, it's all the guys that were starting close to that cut line. So though they get slightly better wins, I would say, don't be surprised if the scoring averages for tomorrow are actually rather consistent throughout the day. So that +1, maybe that like plus 1.25 scoring average is, I think, going to be pretty consistent for the entire round. Now to go through these pins and to show you why I think it's going to be tricky. Jeez Louise, why are they making us click ads out here? That's very annoying. Hole 1's on this front corner though, so if I can bring it up here, you'll see it's about where my cursor is right now. It's actually a little bit of a harder pin than today because it's towards the front side of this green. And what you'll know about front side pin locations at a course with firm greens is that they're harder to get close to. And especially when you're hitting a long iron in, and some players might have like 170 into this green if they're hitting a massive driver and cutting the corner. But the vast majority of the field is going to have 185 to 220 into this green complex, which makes that sort of pin a little bit harder. So next up, we got hole 2, which is in the middle of the screen, literally pretty much the dead center. So I would say it looks like it's an easier pin, but it's not. It brings this right miss more into play with this massive slope that goes about 20 yards off. And then you also have this ridge throughout the center of the screen here that my cursor's over right now that you have to go over to get to this pin. So a little bit trickier than today, which you would expect because today was on that front corner and it was about as gettable as you can get with a wedge in. And unlike hole 1, where it's like 200 yards in, you were hitting something like a wedge into hole 2. So that's why it was gettable at the front there. Hole 3 is now in this back right corner, which isn't too far from where it was today. It's just going to be a little bit further into the screen, so still above that little bit of a slope that runs throughout this green complex. If you end up on this lower tier, it is a very difficult two-putt. And it's actually going to be an even more difficult two-putt now that it's in this back corner. And the around the green shot could be a little bit trickier as well, partially depending on the angle that you're coming in. Next up, you have hole 4, which is in this middle left side, which is at a little high point that you have around my cursor here. So you can see beyond this pin, it runs away from you. In front of the pin, it's sloped into. So the perfect shot would be to land it into the slope and get it to run up next to the pin location. But anything that lands at the pin or beyond is going to run over this. Then, of course, you've got this bunker to the left, which with all that slope that's coming off that bunker would be really difficult to get up and down. It's a sneaky, difficult pin location, which is kind of the case with all of these so far. Next up, we have 5, which is on this front left corner. This is another sneaky hard pin location, and it looks easier on paper because it's not as protected by this bunker. It's maybe it looks easier from the overhead view because it's got all this room to run it up, but you can't run it up at this hole because of this false front in front of it. Everything's going to get rejected by that unless it's coming in with a lot of steam. So if you're coming at this pin location with like your typical kind of setup, you've got to carry it to right about where it is where my cursor is now and try and stop it with spin. So you have to be coming out of the fairway to have any chance at doing that. And if you go a little long, so let's assume that you don't hit the fairway, you're in like the bunker or the rough, well, it's going to run past. You pretty much have no chance to stop it there unless you land it short and you somehow get the distance right in judging the bounce onto the green. More than likely, though, you're going to land it on the green and it's going to run off onto this little slope and then off of the green complex here. So this is another one that I think your casual PGA Tour fans are like, oh, that looks like one that you don't have to worry about. It's maybe the hardest pin that we've had so far, and you would only know that if you look at the slopes. Next up, you have 6, which is in the middle of this par 3. It was moved up today, though, so it only played to about 220 yards. This can play to 245, 250, and that's what I'm expecting them to do tomorrow. So though the pin might be a little bit less tucked than what it was on this front corner, it is going to be a harder shot because people are hitting 7 woods, driving irons into it instead of something a little bit shorter. Hole 7 is your par 5, and it's on this front right corner. So that's going to be the hardest pin by far that you have at this hole. It's difficult to chip to. So if you bail out left, you got all this slope to deal with. And then if you hit it long, like a lot of people will, then you have to putt down this slope and try and judge the speed for a 2-putt. So the birdie average will go down now that it's in that low spot. Hole 8 is in this back left corner, so I already know where this pin is. It's about where my cursor is now. It's like 5 paces to the left of where it was for today. And the difference with this hole is that they're probably going to move it back too. This tee box was moved up about 30 yards. You can see it at the very front of this tee box. That's about where like the senior tees would be if they were playing as members at Quail Hollow Club. So expect them to move it back for tomorrow, which means that most people are going to be laying up here. Might slightly increase the fairway average for some of your shorter players off the tee that aren't going to still hit driver right. They might hit like a driving iron. If you're somebody like Brian Harmon, for example, that doesn't have that kind of driving distance. But this back left corner, I mean, look how tucked that is. If we bring up the slopes in this back left corner, you've got some slope in front of it. That's a false front. It's like a little peninsula because of that slope to the right. It's just a really tough spot to put a pin location. Hole 9 is like very difficult. It's like the hardest pin I've ever seen. It's in this back right corner, so you can see it over here. It's for days 1 through 3, they put the pin in the center of the screen. They didn't screw around with it at all. Like literally all 3 rounds so far, it's been within about 5 paces of where it is right now. Now it's going to be in this back right corner where you have this slope that is running away from you in that corner. So if you try to land it around this flag, it's going to land and then just reject over the back. And then think if you miss the screen. So rather than it being in the center where it's like a reasonable up and down, you have all this room to work with. If you're short of the screen, let's say you're short right, you have to carry this bunker, you have 0 chance. It's like an automatic bogey if you finish in the front right. And even if you go on like the front side over here, like the front left, then you have the angle, but like look how long of a chip shot this is. So it's I think going to get way harder at hole number 9, and this hole might play to like a 4.6 4.7 average, which is what you have at the par 5s at this golf course. And I think they can even lengthen it from the tee box, so you can see, right, they moved it up a little bit with the tee box here. Imagine if they fully tip it out and play it to that sort of pin. It would just be game over for a lot of players, especially your shorter guys. Hole 10 is a left side pin, and this is another sneaky hard one. Like you look at it from the overhead view and you go, okay, this one isn't that hard, but look where it is. It's on this ridge where everything past it runs away. And this is a trend that we've seen so far, right? Where it's on a high spot where if you go long, it keeps going. And if you're short, it's going to stop because it's into the slope. Those are the hardest pins that you could find on these golf courses. And if you miss short-sided in this left bunker, it is going to be really hard to get it up and down. You miss in the right bunker, though, you're going to have a better chance at making a birdie. It's not a given, though, because you can see all the slope is running towards that location. So still going to be hard to get the speed right on that chip. 11 is in this back right corner. So it's kind of similar to today in terms of like the depth of the screen, but it is closer to the right side as opposed to this back left corner. I would say a little bit of an easier pin location just because it's not as protected by those bunkers and it's not all carry to get into that back corner. But that's one of the few ones that looks easier, right? Like almost all these pin locations have been pretty tricky so far. Hole 12 is a front pin on this front right corner. I would say that this is another one that looks a little bit easier. This false front is going to cause some issues, but I would rather have it on the low area of the screen than on this back left corner where you have to carry it over that slope throughout the green. The issue is that because it's on this front right corner, the slope to the right side, which doesn't look that severe, it's severe enough though that if you get anything running past this pin and even one step to the right of this pin location, it's going to hit the slope and then go off the green, and it's going to trickle off like 3 or 4 yards into a deeper cut of rough. So this is maybe marginally easier just because of that slope throughout the green, but it's another one where it's like probably about the same difficulty, if we're being honest, because of that miss to the right being so prominent. You're going to see a ton of people over there. Even people that hit good shots and hit the green are going to end up over there to the right. 13 is in the middle back of the screen, so it's going to play even longer than today. And just to check the tee box, I think they tipped it out today. And yeah, they tipped it out. Maybe they move it up for tomorrow. They might move up one tee box for the final day, but don't expect them to do it outside of like one hole at the very most. 14 is a hard pin in the back right corner. In fact, it's not in this like back left like it was for round 2. Now it's in this back right corner. It's not quite in the far back. It's like closer to where my cursor is right now. But either way, a way harder pin than today because it's a much more difficult up and down if you try and drive that green. 15, and you might see people laying up there, by the way, because it is such a hard up and down if you try and drive it. 15 is in the back right corner. So this is another one of those easy holes that has a hard pin location. This is part of the reason why I think the birdie average isn't going to get too far out of hand, because this is another one where even if you get it up near the green, the chip shot is so much harder than today. Like today, if you're on this front right, you could chip over this bunker and still get it kind of close. You missed to the front left. It was a super easy up and down. You were chipping into the slope. Now you got to go like a 40, 50 yard chip to the back there. It's just going to be a much lower birdie rate, in my opinion. 16 is a front left pin location. So, and this is another one that if you were looking at the sheet just from the overhead views, you go, oh, it's an easier pin location. Absolutely not. This back right one wasn't an easy pin location. I will give you that. But now that it's over here, it brings the water into play, but it also brings 2 slopes into play as well. The one in front, the little false front, which again, this doesn't look that severe, but it's a lot more severe than you think when they're running at 13s on the stint meter. And then over here to the right side, so left side for the players as they come in from the fairway, that little slope there towards the side is also going to take shots off. So not only is it towards the water, which will bring in water balls, but you're also going to have another one of those double-sided pin locations where if you go a little bit long, you're going to get absolutely screwed, which, by the way, sometimes that wouldn't be a problem, like going long, you just take less club. This is a firm and fast golf course, though. If you even hit the green with your iron shot, it's going to end up bouncing over, is essentially what I'm telling you. 17 is a middle left pin, so this is also a hole that was shortened today. I would expect them to tip it out tomorrow, so not only is it going to play longer, but it's also towards the water and another pin location. And by the way, this is probably the hardest pin on the golf course, because look at it again. It's on that high spot where the slope in front of it is into you, but you go long and everything runs away and off of the green. So the green mile is hard to begin with, but especially when they're giving you these diabolical spots. And then finally, 18 is in the back left corner, which does bring the water into play, because not only do you have water here to this side, people forget about the water over the back. And because it's over here tucked towards this back left corner, you are going to see people that hit this back quadrant and then ricochet off into the creek. So I would expect people to be very conservative to this pin location. But even if you do, then you have to putt over this slope throughout the green. Let's say that you laid up to this front side. I mean, if you miss this green, it is maybe the hardest up and down that you have on the golf course to get it over the slope that runs throughout the green. And it's like a 40-50 yard shot. Let's say if you missed in this front right bunker. So in general, these pins look very, very hard, especially on the easier holes on the golf course, which is why I think the birdie average is going to, like I said, stay stagnated. On bogey average, though, I think some of the harder holes could be about the same, like even with the wind going down a little bit. I don't think it's going to change all that much. So that's what I have in terms of the identity of the golf course here. And then already some props that I've entered over here on these sites. So we're going to go through a slip here on Prize Picks together. I've already entered also an Underdog slip, and talk through exactly how I'm attacking these boards. So he said, Luke, did the delay surprise me? You were stunned. Yeah, of course, man. Nobody really knew that was going to happen. It was just rainstorms that were forecasted, and it happened after lock. So, yeah, I think if anyone tells you they saw it coming, they were full of shit, and they're just lying to you. He said that Scotty performance felt real, missed one fairway, shot -6. Yeah, it's the normal Scotty that we're used to seeing. Days 1 and 2, he still shot decently, but he really didn't have his best stuff. Round 4 was a lot different, like you're saying. He said, appreciate the content, hit Scotty end around leader. Yeah, we did mention that on the live stream. What do I think about Rahm in the winner without Scotty, Rory, and Bryson market? If he's plus 350, I kind of like that, Tyler. I haven't really taken a look at who else he has to play against, but it's all those unproven slapdicks. So, I mean, Norton's the main competition, I guess, because he's starting 2 shots ahead of Jon Rahm. I'd have to double check the other few guys that he's playing against at that -7 mark, but plus 375 seems like a decent enough number that I would at least go through it and see what kind of equity I would be giving him there. He said, you're debating if any of the bogey or worse lines are worth it with Hovland and McNeely at 4. Well, you got to let me know if you're looking over or under, because I think you could take that one of 2 directions there. And he said Bryson under 69.5 or Rahm under 70.5. Both need fantastic rounds, but who do I like over the other? We're actually going to mention Bryson here, so let's talk about it, Brandon. Let's start off with this under on Michael Kim first, though. So you can probably tell I'm going to like some fades. There's going to be more fades on this live stream than what we're taking with positive stance plays. But let's start with the Michael Kim fade. So he's at 3.5 on DraftKings, just to show you the sportsbook line value. He's at 3.5 and -130 under. So a little bit of juice working in our favor on that spot. But Michael Kim is also the number 134 birdie percentage player on tour. So just to show you that exactly, let's go over here to this tab and then find Michael Kim. You'll see when we can find the right Kim that he's number 134, like I was saying before. So he's a below average birdie maker. Birdie average, I think, is going to be like 3.1, maybe 3.3 per round. He's out of form. He has said he's dealing with some back issues. There's just a whole bunch of reasons of what he'd be taking this kind of under. And on top of that, he's not always the best chipper of the golf ball. And the par 4s, especially like the drivable one there at 14, is one where you have to have a really good short game to hit it close. And then even on the par 5s, if you're missing them in 2, they're at much harder spots to get up and down. So I kind of like that, fading Michael Kim's short game a bit. And then the other side of this I took was the only positive stance play that we're going to talk through. I think you should be very selective about any positive stance plays that you use, whether it's for birdies, strokes, that sort of thing. But I liked this Bryson under at 70. So he's not at 69.5 like we had the question for. I like him for the under at 70 because he has that push equity at that number. He's at 69.5 on the books. He is juiced a little bit towards the over, but I like Bryson when he's not in the lead. On the Live Tour, if you guys have been following him over the last few months or so, he's had the lead on the Live Tour heading into the last round in 5 straight events. He's only won one of those events. And of those 5 leads, he had leads of like 3-4 strokes at times that he would choke on Sundays. So if he was in the lead and he was at 70 strokes, I would probably be looking to fade a Bryson DeChambeau. But now that he's starting, I think it's 5 shots off the lead, maybe even 6 shots off the lead at his current standing, he's not going to be dealing with nearly as much of that mental fatigue. So you just got to evaluate him as the player that he is. And on paper for me this week, he was my number 1 play of the week. Number 1 form, number 1 course fit around a Quail Hollow. He putts well on this kind of a surface. And outside of the double bogey on 17 today, he was on track for a -4 round, which is one of the better rounds that you had in those windy conditions. And the weather isn't ideal, like you also said in that comment, Brandon, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was today. I'm actually much more worried about the pin locations than I am the actual weather for Sunday, which is I'm okay with on a Bryson. Like he's shown us at harder courses, Winged Foot. He took on that golf course when he had the hardest possible setup and won the U.S. Open. Pinehurst was also a really hard golf course where he won the U.S. Open last year. I like the push equity at that number, if not the upside to go out there and beat that. So that's a 3x payout on Prize Picks. And the reason why we had to find that positive stance play is that if you take 2 fades on this site, so just to show you, right, if we had the over on strokes, you'd get 2.5x if you ended up getting both correct. So I'm not going to do that. I guess if I was going to find something that wasn't a positive stance play, I was considering going to a few of these birdie or better matchups, but nothing stood out as big enough value for me to go out there and enter it myself. In fact, really the only one I was looking at before might have been the Xander Schauffele under on birdie or better matchup, just because Sam Burns is also a decent birdie maker and he's getting that 0.5 added to his score, but I stayed away from it. I'd rather take this Bryson prop. He's the kind of guy that I'm expecting to take a foot forward. And you could consider the John Rahm one as well. In fact, I hadn't looked at the line value on that one. And now that you're asking about it, I'm kind of curious. So they have them at about even money at that sort of number. So no really inherent line value. That's kind of why I went with the Bryson one instead, because, even though he is juiced towards the over at 69.5, he's 0.5 lower and that push equity matters on a site like Prize Picks here. So I took those 2 together. Then on the Underdog side is where I have 2 fades. And you can see the one at the top there. We're going back to the Rory under on fairways, which I think they may have bumped just now. So if they did, let me see what they put the multiplier at. So they still have them at the same number, but I think they're thinking about bumping it because they just had that taken off the board there. Well, let's start with the Rory fairway fade, which, by the way, went over by 0.5 today. It was heartbreaking for us to miss that slip by that number. It was absolute bullshit, though. He hit a ball off a tree twice and back into the fairway. At 14, he had a ball go into the lip of a bunker rather than rolling into it. All day, I'd been watching that hole on the featured Coles coverage, and all the balls had gone into the bunker except for Rory McIlroy. In fact, you can look at the scatter plot of tee shots, and he's the only one that stayed out of the bunker that was up on that kind of slope. So sure, if you ended up taking the over on Rory today, you got paid off, but you just got lucky. You're a complete slappy if you took that sort of bet, because Rory on the year, just to show you guys these averages and why I'd be on that sort of number, he's had one of the best driving accuracy years of his entire career. In fact, to this point, the best driving accuracy year that he's ever had. And he's number 175 on tour in terms of hitting fairways. If you take a look at his recent starts, in fact, we'll do that here together for you guys and bring it up on Data Golf. Over his last 5-6 starts, look at the accuracy he's losing to the field. -15%, -10%. His best week was a -2% at the Texas Houston Open. And the average for fairways today was 8.27 per round. Wind kind of contributes to that, but let's say it goes up to 8.3, 8.4 per round. You also got to remember that the course is going to dry out after a little bit of rain they had this morning. So that's why I'm not really expecting the average to move all that much. No crap. I like Rory for the under if he's number 175 in accuracy, and this number is over that field average. So I'm going back to it. If he burns me 2 rounds in a row, then so be it. It's a value prop, right? I'm not somebody that gets overreactional or has emotional reactions to any people doing that. I bet it to begin with. Shit happens on props. Really good value a lot of times doesn't end up getting there. And I've taken shitty props before that end up moving in like negative CLV, like end up working out as worse value than when I took them, that end up smacking and hitting for a lot more than I expected. So, I know that happens. It's a part of this crazy sport that we bet on. And like I said, a value prop's a value prop. And I was kind of surprised that they offered that same sort of number. And on the sports books, he is still minus 130 for the under. So if you're looking for a little bit of line value, it is there. Plus, from the traditional analysis perspective, I think it was a no-brainer. So mixing that one in again. And then this Brian Harman I took for the over on strokes. He's also minus 130 for his over. So all of these different props we're taking, except for the Bryson one, which was the discrepancy that we were playing, are line value. So you can see here with the Harman, he's minus 130 for the over. Today, if we take a look at the shots gained metrics for him, you'll see that it was rather unsustainable. So Brian Harman today was, if I can type it right and get it to show up, he gained 1.5 strokes putting. That was the only category he was into the positive with, but he lost 3.6 strokes on approach. So, losing in the most important category that you have is going off early, really doesn't have that much to gain by shooting a low round. And if I think the average for the field is still going to be +1, maybe plus 1.25, even an average round would be an over for Brian Harman. And considering that he's out of form and towards the bottom end of the board, I think even shooting an average round would be a pretty good day for him around this sort of golf course. It's long, 7,600 yards. They're going to tip it out with it being a Sunday, right? Those tee boxes that were moved up, probably not going to be moved up again, which works completely against a player like a Brian Harman. So this pays 2.85x if you mix them in together, which for a fade slip is much better than what you'd get on Prize Picks. So that's why we had to find the positive stance play in Bryson to mix in over there. Maybe you use a birdie better matchup to take away that multiplier. But if you're going to enter fade slips, which is kind of what I'm looking at for tomorrow, at least based on the pins, the setup, how that's going to impact play, Underdog's the better site to play on. And I usually like to look at sleeper as well. Yesterday, we didn't have a sleeper board posted when we were doing the live stream, but they've been posting a lot of line value for the last few days. And it actually hasn't translated to as much success as what I've hoped for. But if there's line value, I'm going to go out there and try and smack it. So for example, I'm looking at that site right now, and they have Bryson at 70.5. So if you liked him at 70, like I did out there for an under 70.5, you'd have to like him even more. But looking through this, they also have some of these slappies at a little bit of better projections than what you have on Prize Picks. So like, for example, some of like the unknown guys towards the top are at like 71.5 strokes. And like, out of curiosity, I'm going to see if they have like JJ Spawn on the board. He's at 71.5 on a site like Sleeper, also at that same number on Prize Picks. So I guess that one wasn't as drastically off as I thought. Let's look through a few others. So JT Poston, he's at 70.5 over there. What is he? Yeah, and he's at 72 on a site like Prize Picks. Like, if you're trying to find some PM guys to fade, I don't hate fading some of these guys that are more putting first players. And the multiplier on that for JT Poston is also pretty favorable at 70.5. So let's look at that one. Let's see what else they have. They have 70.5 on a Hovland. He's a slightly higher tier player, though. They have a whole bunch of guys at 70.5 at minus 0.5 that don't seem like they should be at that sort of number. Like Berger at that number. Who else? Like, I get when you have guys like Bryson, John Rahm at 70.5, your elite tier players in the field, but not so much when it's guys like a Daniel Berger, for example. So let's see what they have Berger at. Is he also at 72? So he's at 71 strokes. So JT Poston is the one that's a 1.5 stroke discrepancy. So that's the biggest that we've seen so far. But let me look at the other categories. So on Sleeper, they have birdie lines posted as well. They look kind of similar to these other sites, except that they have multipliers on them as opposed to what you see on some of these other ones. They moved JT Poston just now, by the way, to 71.5 strokes. So they're on top of us when it comes to these bumps. That's the one thing I'll say about Sleeper is that they're really, really quick to go out there and move some of these lines. But if you're on top of it, you can find a lot of value that opens up as well. So yeah, we're probably not going to be able to enter a slip here together because as soon as I even look at a prop, They're changing the odds on them in real time. But for all the exposure that I'm playing for tomorrow's slate, guys, you can find that over there on my Patreon page. It's all the Underdog stuff, all the Prize Picks stuff that I'm playing. Every single slip as I enter it is posted there for my Patreon members, so you can catch all the value before it goes out there and moves on you. And on top of that, I also have all my DFS projections posted on my Patreon page. So here's a look at that for tomorrow. You can see I've got my projected GPP ownership, my player pool projected points for round number 4. And by the way, Scotty, 72% projected ownership is the highest number that I've ever seen on a slate like this. And on top of just giving you the projections, I also have player pool tags on exactly why I'm using all these guys. Like I've got course history guys. The PP means placement points. So players that are starting towards the top end of the board, but high upside players, short game regression candidates, ball strikers, you name it, all included out there on my DFS sheet. So check that out if you guys haven't already. I'm going to bring up the prop boards for one last second and go over any bets that you've got for me in the chat. So anything that you're curious on, feel free to go ahead and let me know right now, because if not, we're going to hop on out of here in a few minutes. So where we leave off, said over on the bogeys are worse. I don't know about that, Jamari. I think the average is going to be about 4 per round. And if you're looking at Hovland and McNeely, above average players, I think 4 is a pretty good projection for them. And part of the reason I say that too is that they're at 3.5 on sports books rather than 4.5 and juiced under. So that shows you that they're projecting those guys for just a little bit under that 4 mark, which is another reason to maybe not consider that. 70.5 on sleeper. Yeah, go ahead and play it there if you want. Hey, Luke, you love my content. What are my thoughts on fading Scotty in DFS? He said he's expensive and high owned. I talk about that extensively on the Showdown live stream, Derek. So I'm going to go ahead and defer you to that just because I gave like 10 minutes on it and whatnot. And it would be a little crazy to do here on the prop stream. So make sure to check that out on the Ship It Nation YouTube. There is a ton of Showdown stuff on there. I talk about the pros and cons of playing Scotty, what happens if you don't play him, because it's not just playing Scotty or not. It impacts the rest of your lineup, specifically all the spend ups that you can get to. So you'll want to watch that. So thanks for all the insight. Ironically, we're looking at Fleetwood versus Kim for pretty better matchups. You know what? If you want to fade Kim that way, I'm okay doing it that way too with Fleetwood. Fleetwood's a really good course fit around here. So what am I thinking about the tournament finishing position? You're going to have to let me know a specific player, Landon, because I haven't looked at that category at all. Reason why, Landon, is because on the sports books, you can find better numbers. And if I was ever going to bet like tournament finishing position, so like top 5, top 10s, I would do it on the sports books just because you get better numbers. He said the greens are baking out and the rough is up to 4 inches in most spots on top of the pin placements. He said it won't be easy. Yeah, I agree with that, man. Like, I think a lot of casuals will see the weather being a little bit easier and go, oh, scoring is going to get a whole lot easier. And it's not. It's going to get a little bit easier, but not a lot easier. Do you like Gerard for the over 3.5 birdies for 1.99x? Also Davis at 1.87x. I don't know if I'd say I like them, man, because those overs on birdies, like Bobby was saying, the pin locations aren't set up for a lot of birdies. And if I think the average for the field is going to be about 3.1 per round, lower tier guys like Gerard and Davis are projecting for at best maybe 3.3, 3.4 per round. They're in decent form, like Gerard especially. I like how he's hitting the ball this week. And same thing with Davis. He actually hit the ball well today as well. I'm playing them both in fantasy, just to give you an example. So I am getting some exposure to those sort of guys, but I wouldn't be taking their over on birdies for a 50-50 prop when I think that they're going to have to gain a whole birdie to the field. It'd be different if this was like the Wyndham Championship. Then like, sure, yeah, I'd be taking their over on those sort of players. But this is a major. This is the PGA Championship. Literally, like all the world's best only players are the ones that made it to the weekend. It's just a little bit harder to want to do that with that level of player. He said they're deaf listening to me. Yeah, the sleeper people, dude, their lines makers need a lot of help. So, hey, sleeper, if you're watching this, go ahead and just hit me up for some consulting stuff because your people don't know what the hell they're doing. He said, thoughts on Rahm's strokes line at 70.5. He said he'd like the under. If I could get it for even money, so like minus 105, minus 110 odds, I'd bet that one straight up, man. Like sometimes I don't like betting like props on DFS sites like Underdog and Prize Picks because you're essentially taking minus 130 juice, minus 140 juice even, depending on the slip that you're taking on a lot of those props. Like I won't bet a prop like Rahm on a site like that because I know that in the back of my head. It's like, why would I do that when I can find props that have some sort of juice behind them and make it a little bit more fair when it comes to the juice that we're playing. But like on Rahm, I agree on that. Like I think he plays well tomorrow. I would bet that at -110 straight up. So it's a little bit of a different situation. He said, okay, sorry for asking that. You'll check that out. Yeah, so you're good on asking it. It's just that, you know, it would take a long time to do it, and I've already done it. So I'd rather you watch that one. He said, appreciate the time and info. He said, good luck, of course. And you said, we really appreciate you. Of course, guys. Appreciate all of you guys and all the kind things that you're saying there. But it's all I've got. I'm going to go ahead and hop on out of here. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. And I'll see you guys for all the content for next week's event.